Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
Its silver body was considered smaller among the Wyrms, but compared to humans, it was still rather large. However, its large body turned into a silver lightning, which immediately dashed towards Lin Li, issuing the loud sounds of the rapid expansion of the air. When the silver Wyrm appeared, Lin Li already understood the workings of the barbarous arena. Hence, he had long kept his guard up. Looking at the moving body of the silver Wyrm, Lin Li immediately reacted. An ice wall that was thicker and heavier than a city wall immediately appeared in front of him. At the same time, his body vanished behind the ice wall. The silver lightning struck the ice wall, but it did not make any sounds of a violent impact. The silver Wyrm's figure appeared behind the ice wall, which also exploded into a thick fog. As the fog faded, a massive hole gradually appeared. The ice wall was not an ordinary ice wall, but rather was cast by Lin Li, a sanctuary powerhouse. It was as hard as diamond, and would never melt. Even if the ice wall was struck continuously by legendary magic spells for a year, they might not even leave any trace on it. Although a powerful strike from a sanctuary powerhouse could shatter the ice wall, it would be several times harder to penetrate it. The silver Wyrm did not use any space power, and instead relied on its powerful body and its lightning speed to bore a massive hole in the ice wall. Even Lin Li couldn't help but have a change of expression, as his heart was filled with immense excitement. At Lin Li's level, it was not easy for him to find an opponent. There were very few sanctuary powerhouses in Anril in the first place, and it was even rarer for there to be any that could fight Lin Li. Those who had stepped into the sanctuary realm thanks to the magic tides recently were only pseudo-sanctuary powerhouses, who were not qualified to become Lin Li's opponents at all. Sanctuary powerhouses like the three arbitrators of the sanctuary realm could not always train with Lin Li, either. Although there were sanctuary powerhouses who were of the same strength as Lin Li, the lives of sanctuary powerhouses were very precious. Who would fight him toe-to-toe for no reason? Hence, to Lin Li, having an opponent of equal strength, who could go all out and fight with him was much more valuable than any massive amount of wealth. Nonetheless, he was facing an opponent of equal strength. Hence, Lin Li soon suppressed his excitement, and his expression returned to normal as he became composed again. He raised the Helios scepter in his hand, and engaged the Wyrm calmly. After the silver Wyrm missed, it also immediately exerted its space power. While its massive body moved nimbly in the space, it chased after Lin Li's figure, and launched a series of frenzied attacks like the space shuttle, space shackle, space trap, and many other peculiar attacks at him. The silver Wyrm was like the master of the space in the arena. Lin Li's powerful offensive spells were immediately devoured by the spatial black hole, while the bizarre yet lethal attacks passed through space without any hindrance. They appeared around Lin Li without warning, and even his domain world could not stop them. However, Lin Li was not getting beaten up passively. He did not get abused by Garesco's incarnation, and learn those combat techniques for nothing. The gemstone on top of the Helios scepter shone brightly, and he continuously cast powerful magic spells that bombarded the silver Wyrm ferociously without mercy. The battle between the two sanctuary powerhouses was definitely groundbreaking, and the roaring noises were incessant. When the two powerful forces collided, it resulted in horrifying spatial rifts. If such an intense battle had happened in Anril, the space would have long collapsed and crumbled. The aftershocks of the battle were probably enough to destroy a city countless times. However, despite the intense battle, the barbarous arena was not damaged in the slightest. The inconspicuous ground and the stone pillars that had been existing for numerous years did not chip, despite the powerful impact of the silver Wyrms and Lin Li's horrifying magical bombardment. The exciting battle caused Lin Li to unknowingly fuse the knowledge that he had learned from Garesco with his body, and the mana in him was fully triggered, just like a river that was flowing calmly turning into a raging flood. Under the support of the endless mana, Lin Li cast the magic spells continuously, but he was not purely pouring out mana. After all, Lin Li was now facing an opponent whose strength was similar to his, and who was perhaps even much stronger than him. It was not something that could be suppressed with a magic storm. Unlike magic storms that were formed with a large number of magic spells, Lin Li was continuously casting a large number of magic spells without stopping. However, he planned every magic spell, each had a specific purpose. The momentary intersection between darkness and light, the intertwining between the biting cold and blazing flames, and the various elemental laws were exhibiting incredible power and function under Lin Li's control. After just a few minutes of fighting, Lin Li gained control of the battle's rhythm. Although the two of them seemed to be on par with each other, the silver Wyrm had actually fallen into a trap under Lin Li's coercion. As Lin Li controlled the pace of battle, scars gradually began to appear on the silver Wyrm's body that was covered in shiny scales. In the end, When the light and darkness sword pierced the space, and the massive mouth of the silver wyrm, it stopped moving, and its massive body gradually became transparent. In the end, it vanished without a trace. Holding the Helios scepter in his hand, Lin Li quietly looked at the place where the silver wyrm vanished, and he quickly recalled the battle just now while analyzing the gains and losses. The experience that he had gained from such an evenly matched battle was a massive amount of wealth, and every bit of enlightenment would mean a substantial increase in his abilities. About a minute after the silver wyrm vanished, a powerful magical wave appeared in the space opposite Lin Li. Next, a massive wave of mana emerged from the space again, followed by a fire demon that was covered in flames. With the appearance of the fire demon, the entire arena seemed to have become a furnace as the heat that could melt steel filled the entire space. Compared to the fire demon king that Lin Li had encountered back in Ozric's mausoleum, this fire demon was countless times stronger, and the surging mana wave showed that it had already reached the middle of level 27. In the endless abyss, such a powerful fire demon was definitely more dominant than a lord of the abyss. However, it somehow appeared in the barbarous arena. After appearing, the fire demon roared in exasperation, and began attacking Lin Li ferociously without hesitation. The domain world that the fire demon exhibited was a world of lava, where the ground was covered in lava, while the sky was like an inverted sea of fire, from where large and small lava fireballs were constantly dripping down like rain. With a loud roar of the fire demon, the entire world of lava began burning up, and streams of lava formed a massive wave that smashed against Lin Li in a groundbreaking manner. The waves formed by the lava contained the lava laws that the fire demon had mastered. The power of each stream of lava was akin to that of a legendary level magic spell. They were stacked upon each other like they were endless. Under the constant pounding of the lava waves, Lin Li's domain world let out groans like it was overwhelmed. The spatial barriers were soon covered in cracks. However, in the face of these, Lin Li remained still, and continued to cast magic spells that seemed ineffective. The magic spells that he cast vanished as soon as they entered the world of lava. Even a heavy rainstorm would vanish in it. Seeing his opponent's feeble counterattack, a look of contempt formed on the fire demon's hideous face. Initially, he could already sense that Lin Li's mana was not inferior to his, and he thought that it would be difficult to deal with him. Hence, he went all out as soon as the battle began. But it seemed that humans were just humans. Even if he was lucky to step into the sanctuary realm, he was still no match for the fire demon. Despite being a little disdainful, the fire demon did not relax because of this, and instead increased the intensity of his attack after roaring. He had already gotten sick of that game, and he just wanted to finish off that tiny human as soon as possible before seeing what kind of place he had come to. Freeze! As soon as the fire demon intensified its attack, Lin Li suddenly hollered in a low voice, and pointed the Helios scepter forward. Immediately, a burst of extreme chilliness suddenly emerged from the streams of bright red lava, which were extinguished without any struggle. At the same time, thick layers of frost covered the solidified lava, as if it had turned into a wall of frost. After freezing the lava wave, the extreme chilliness spread towards the surroundings without stopping. In the blink of an eye, it turned the lava world of the fire demon into a snowfield. The spot beneath the fire demon's feet was the only area that still looked like lava. However, he could still see the entanglement between ice and fire. If the fire demon had just stepped into the sanctuary realm, he would probably have been in huge trouble. He might even have to give up his body. However, a level 27 fire demon was now standing in the arena, and he was much stronger than Lin Li. Despite having been set up by Lin Li, he got even angrier and refused to lose the upper hand. The fire demon stomped his feet forcefully, and a ball of flames began spreading towards the surroundings with his body as its center, thus turning the frost a bright, fiery red color. Next, the dense sounds of fire cackling echoed in the arena as the frost that was covering the lava shattered and began burning in the flames. Despite the changes, Lin Li did not seem dejected. If the fire demon was finished off like that, he would be disappointed in the barbarous arena, and the fire demon. A battle between sanctuary powerhouses was not a comparison of mana strength or the understanding and usage of nomological power. Instead, it was a comparison of their mastery of the world laws. The final victory of the battle between Lin Li and the fire demon was only one aspect. Most importantly, he had found something worth learning from the fire demon, such as combat experience, power origin, and the mysteries of the domain world. To Lin Li, the process of the battle was a learning experience. Of course, once Lin Li truly mastered everything from his opponent, there would be no doubt about the outcome of the battle. However, the fire demon was stronger than Lin Li, after all. Besides, in the endless abyss, every minute and second was a chance for a battle, and he would definitely get rich combat experience. Otherwise, there would be no way for him to survive in the endless abyss. let alone enter the sanctuary realm. Although Lin Li had obtained all sorts of knowledge from Garesco, the battle with the sanctuary-level fire demon was still incredibly difficult. The two of them fought for dozens of hours, until their energy clearly began to drain. With a minor advantage, Lin Li painstakingly sent the fire demon back to the endless abyss. However, although the fire demon had broken free, it still wasn't over for Lin Li. A few minutes after Lin Li defeated the fire demon, another wave of horrifying mana landed in the barbarous arena. This time, the opponent who appeared was a high elf that was dressed in a resplendent battle suit. He was clearly more powerful than the fire demon, and was near the peak of level 27. Lin Li could tell from the attire of the high elf that he was a royal, but he did not know his exact identity. The high elf royal immediately kept his eyes fixed on Lin Li. As soon as he appeared in the barbarous arena, he did not seem confused at all, nor did he try to figure out where he was. He was holding a luxurious longsword, which had a gemstone on the hilt. Like the previous two opponents, this high elf royal had no intention of talking to Lin Li at all. He simply picked up his sword and launched a murderous attack on Lin Li. Unlike the high elves, humans had a variety of combat professions such as mages, sword sages, and assassins due to their own limitations. However, every high elf could be considered an all-rounded elite. In addition to the fact that high elves had great talent, their incredibly long lifespan was undoubtedly an important reason for them to be all-rounded. In the eyes of the high elves, magic and combat skills were all about the use of power, so holding a sword did not mean that they did not know how to cast magic spells. This high elf royal was undoubtedly an elite of the high elves, who had extremely high attainments in combat skills and magic. After exchanging blows with the high elf, Lin Li soon had a deeper understanding of his abilities. If this high elf royal were to fight with the silver wyrm and the fire demon, it definitely wouldn't have as hard of a time as Lin Li. However, in the face of a more powerful opponent, Lin Li did not feel timid at all. In fact, he got even more excited, and the fatigue that he felt after the battle with the fire demon also vanished completely at this moment, because he knew that fighting continuously with a powerhouse was the only way his abilities could increase rapidly. The battle with the high elf royal was clearly much tougher than the previous ones, and Lin Li could be considered to have resorted to all possible means. After spending tens of hours, he finally defeated the arrogant high elf royal. Of course, through such a battle, Lin Li could clearly sense that he had gained a lot of things too. After the high elf royal, the barbarous arena continued to pick out stronger and more powerful opponents for Lin Li, including prehistoric magical beasts that had vanished from unknown human powerhouses, and even barbarians who claimed to be the descendants of the Titans. Lin Li continuously squeezed his potential and fused the knowledge that he had learned from Garesco through the battles. In the barbarous arena, Lin Li defeated 10 opponents in a row, and when the 11th opponent appeared, he finally couldn't persist any longer. The 11th opponent that the barbarous arena arranged for Lin Li was an ancient wyrm, whose power Lin Li could not figure out. After the ancient wyrm appeared, it managed to force Lin Li into a desperate situation, causing him to have no means to put his rich repertoire of combat techniques to use. Fortunately, a massive power that could not be contended with protected Lin Li and sent him out of the barbarous arena. By the time Lin Li's vision became clearer, he was already outside the vortex door, and the stone platform and crystal ball were a short distance away from him. With some lingering fear, Lin Li turned around to go to the crystal ball before activating the power in the crystal ball. The crystal ball immediately showed the arena that Lin Li was in previously, and the scenes of him fighting his opponents were on display. He could even adjust the speed of the playback, zoom in and out, and change the perspective of the screen. It was simply a 360-degree battlefield recorder. Previously, Lin Li would summarize gains and losses in the battle after each defeat of his opponents in the barbarous arena. Now, he was watching the battle scenes displayed in the crystal ball from the third-person view. Through the crystal ball, Lin Li could study all the battle scenes in detail and notice some of the things that he had failed to perceive previously. The benefits that the series of intense battles gave Lin Li were beyond his imagination. That was different from the fight between Lin Li and Garesco's incarnation. What Garesco's incarnation taught Lin Li was Garesco's knowledge, and what Lin Li obtained from the training and the battles of the barbarous arena truly belonged to him. Even the knowledge that Lin Li had obtained from Garesco's incarnation was incorporated into his body during the battles, causing his mastery of his power to reach an unprecedented level. Standing in front of the stone platform, Lin Li repeatedly watched the scenes of the battles that he was engaged in the barbarous arena. When he finally internalized everything, he finally played the scene of the last battle. The last battle was actually very short, as it lasted only for a minute or two. Lin Li almost did not get to exhibit any of his countermeasures, and was soon sent back to that place. Frankly speaking, Lin Li did not have much of an impression of that battle. He was all muddled up when he was sent back. Now, Through the playback in the crystal ball, Lin Li finally had a chance to figure out why he suffered such a terrible defeat. However, what made him feel dejected was the fact that no matter how he tried to analyze it, he could not find a single chance of victory. Initially, when he was in the barbarous arena, Lin Li felt that the last opponent's strength was unfathomable, but now, after seeing the replay in the crystal ball, he vaguely felt that the opponent's strength was probably at the peak of level 29 of the Sanctuary Realm. The peak of the Sanctuary Realm. Could it be the same as the 3 arbitrators? Lin Li had had a tough time defeating the first 10 opponents. Even after summarizing all his experiences, he knew that he might not be able to defeat his opponents easily even if he met them again. Besides, he would never be able to trump an opponent who was at the peak of the Sanctuary Realm, because that was beyond his limit. After all, Lin Li had just reached level 27, and even if Garesco's incarnation had personally guided him, there was still a great difference between his level and the peak of the Sanctuary Realm. In the face of absolute power, all his experience, skills, plans, and schemes would just be a joke. Advancing in level would depend on the difference between them two. No matter what, an ant would never be able to raise a huge elephant. Perhaps he would only be able to defeat the ancient Wyrm, which was at the peak of the Sanctuary Realm, when he reached level 28. The longer Lin Li looked at the battle scene in the crystal ball, the more guilty he felt. He simply felt that his opponent was definitely not someone he could defeat at this stage. However, at the thought of this, an idea suddenly popped up in Lin Li's mind. The barbarous arena had already arranged a powerhouse, who was at the peak of the Sanctuary Realm, to be his opponent. When he reached level 28, wouldn't he have to face a powerhouse who had surpassed the Sanctuary Realm? Anyone who surpassed the Sanctuary Realm would probably be at the level of a deity. The absolute difference in realm was not something that could be made up with by other things. Just like how legendary powerhouses would never be able to go against sanctuary powerhouses, even Garesco and powerful existences like the Immortal King probably would not be able to ignore the gap between realms and kill an opponent that was at the level of a god. At the thought of this, Lin Li couldn't help but shake his head. Such a situation seemed to be far away from him, and he thought that he'd better think about how he should deal with the opponent in front of him. Those at the peak of the Sanctuary Realm could be considered demigods. In fact, the difference between them and ordinary sanctuary powerhouses could be considered a difference in realm. Lin Li stood in front of the crystal ball and thought hard for many hours, but was never able to think of a way to win. Feeling helpless, he had no choice but to put the matter aside for the time being. He turned around and stepped through the vortex door again. He then began the challenges in the barbarous arena. This time, his encounter was the same as previously. Lin Li painstakingly defeated 10 opponents, and then was almost defenselessly sent out by the 11th opponent, who was at the peak of the Sanctuary Realm. After he left, he carefully studied the scene in the crystal ball again, and summarized everything that he had realized during the battle. He then entered the arena to start the challenges again. Although every challenge would end at the 11th opponent, Lin Li would still gain massive benefits from the barbarous arena. After all, a battle with an enemy of the same strength, where he needed not worry about dying, was a rare chance for anyone. Every battle would allow Lin Li to have a better control of power. Lin Li even had a vague feeling that as he became more proficient in mastering his power, he might really succeed in crossing the level when he reached some realm and challenged the opponent who was at the peak of the Sanctuary Realm. Of course, he could not enjoy good stuff alone. Other than continuously entering the barbarous arena to face the challenges, Lin Li also arranged for his own men to enter it to receive training. The amazing thing about the barbarous arena was that regardless of the strength of the person who entered, the barbarous arena would automatically assign an opponent of equal strength. In fact, even if a baby entered, the barbarous arena would also arrange a baby as an opponent. Thus, the barbarous arena was not only useful to Lin Li, it was also extremely beneficial and of great help to the legendary mages, or the mages who had yet to reach the legendary realm. Hence, while continuously entering the barbarous arena, Lin Li also called Conorus and the others over. Although relying on the barbarous arena might not let them break through to the sanctuary realm from the peak of the legendary realm, it would allow them to hone their combat power through the battles, and become the foundation for them to break through to the sanctuary realm. Other than Conorus and his other subordinates, Lin Li also instructed Alan to pick out a batch of mages who were loyal and had made outstanding contributions to enter the barbarous arena and receive training. After entering the barbarous arena a few times, the selected mages began to break through the legendary realm one after another. Although there was a large number of people who entered the barbarous arena, each of them would be allocated to an independent space in the arena, and thus they would not affect each other at all. Therefore, Lin Li was not interrupted, and he continued with his tortuous yet gratifying challenges. Just as Lin Li continued to challenge his opponents in the arena, the breezy plains fell into a state of chaos. After a short period of calm, The protagonist of the chaos turned out to be a messenger from the Gilded Kingdom and the Ashen Warlock Roland, who lived in seclusion in the faraway Grand Town. Clearly, Lin Li's previous strike made the people of the Gilded Kingdom realize that it was not easy to attack the breezy plains. Hence, after getting such an outcome, the king of the Gilded Kingdom sent a batch of messengers to the breezy plains in hopes of reaching his goals through other means. Although the people of the Gilded Kingdom also knew that the breezy plains was known as the Land of Chaos, and there were countless forces of various sizes, they had also asked around and found out that the one who held the highest authority in the breezy plains was the Ashen Warlock, who lived in Grand Town. Hence, they clamored about negotiating with the Ashen Warlock. The Ashen Warlock had no qualms about killing a prince of the Felon Kingdom and causing a stir with the Felon Kingdom's army for the sake of his dog. The messenger of the Gilded Kingdom initially thought that the inconspicuous Ashen Warlock, who lived in seclusion, was just a powerhouse who was at the peak of the legendary realm and did not expect to land himself in trouble. The Ashen Warlock would never tolerate others disturbing his peace, and the Gilded Kingdom was extremely hysterical too. After the two parties met, there would definitely be trouble. Not giving the messenger of the Gilded Kingdom any chance to speak, the Ashen Warlock swung his arm and immediately killed the envoys from the Gilded Kingdom. The Ashen Warlock only spared the life of one of the hundreds of envoys, whom he instructed to relay the message to them to look for the president of the Tower of Dusk if they needed something. He also wanted the messenger to tell the people of the Gilded Kingdom not to bother him unnecessarily, otherwise he wouldn't mind making a trip to the Gilded Kingdom. The one who stayed alive was scared out of his wits, and he fled back to sea without stopping. At this moment, he finally knew why the various forces of the breezy plains would be willing to comply with the instructions of an old man who lived in seclusion. As for retaliation, the people of the Gilded Kingdom would probably never dare to reveal their intention to take revenge. The Ashen Warlock was a maniacal sanctuary powerhouse who could not be provoked by just anyone. If he were to go to the Gilded Kingdom, that would probably spell a disaster for the people of the kingdom. However, the people of the kingdom could also tell that the Ashen Warlock was obviously not interested to ask about the matters in the breezy plains. It seemed that they really had to go see the president of the Tower of Ashes. Hence, after the messengers were almost wiped out by the Ashen Warlock, the Gilded Kingdom sent more. This time, they arrived at the Tower of Dusk in Duland, which the Ashen Warlock had mentioned. The size of the Tower of Dusk gave the messenger of the Gilded Kingdom a great shock. Before he arrived, he had found out some information about the Tower of Dusk, and he knew that the Tower of Dusk was a new force that had only been established a few years prior. Although their businesses were developing well, they had the universal problem that all new forces faced, and that was the lack of a background and foundation. However, it seemed now that the development of the Tower of Dusk was beyond the imagination of the messenger. However, no matter what the Tower of Dusk had developed into, it was only a local force in the breezy plains, and the emissary of the Gilded Kingdom represented the powerful Gilded Kingdom that owned the best fleet of battleships in Anral. There was a huge difference between the two, and when juxtaposed, it was just like the contrast between a remote mountain village and a prosperous city. It was simply impossible to compare the two equally. Hence, the envoy of the Gilded Kingdom naturally wouldn't bother about any diplomatic etiquette with the Tower of Dusk. After being surprised for a while, the messenger of the Gilded Kingdom began behaving the way he should, and headed straight to the entrance of the magic city of the Tower of Dusk. He said to a mage who was in charge of reception, "Go and inform your president that a messenger from the Gilded Kingdom has something to say to him, and ask him to come out to meet me. Also, my time is very precious, so don't bother throwing a grand ceremony to welcome me." The mage could not help but look troubled after hearing the words of the envoy of the Gilded Kingdom. Ever since his president stepped into the sanctuary realm, they had never received such an arrogant visitor who had the cheek to mention a welcome ceremony. The messenger had such a great sense of superiority. Even during the time when the Tower of Dusk was first established, anyone who dared to show such an attitude would usually end up in a terrible state. The mage who was in charge of reception scanned the people of the Gilded Kingdom from head to toe. Although he seemed extremely displeased, he was assigned a task, and thus did not procrastinate for long. After telling the messenger to wait, he turned around to inform the senior executives of the Tower of Dusk. At this moment, Lin Li was in the barbarous arena, continuously challenging stronger opponents. Hence, the mage who was in charge of reception naturally had no means of seeing him, and had no choice but to inform Gavin, the senior executive of the Tower of Dusk, about the arrival of the messenger of the Gilded Kingdom. The messenger of the Gilded Kingdom was rather lucky that Lin Li did not have the time to see him. Otherwise, even if Lin Li didn't kill him, he would definitely be kicked out of the Tower of Dusk for his haughty attitude. After hearing the news from his subordinate Gavin, who had gone to meet the messenger of the Gilded Kingdom, mellowed down. Are you Falik? The president of the Tower of Dusk, the messenger of the Gilded Kingdom, asked when he saw Gavin. Ha ha. Gavin chuckled, not bothered by the messenger of the Gilded Kingdom. Of course, he was not enthusiastic or friendly towards him, either. After gesturing to him to enter, he calmly said, I'm sorry, but our president isn't in lately. May I know what you're here for? Gavin did not explain much to the messenger of the Gilded Kingdom, and instead asked him for his purpose of visit. For a mild-mannered person, who had a good temper, it was probably considered an intense reaction. Hearing that the president of the Tower of Dusk was not present, the messenger of the Gilded Kingdom couldn't help but frown. However, he didn't dwell on that matter, and instead said, okay, I will just tell you truthfully. We're going to hold a conference in Kalon City, and all forces of the Breezy Plains have to attend. That's all. As soon as he arrived, the messenger of the Gilded Kingdom did not mention his name at all, and now he did not even bother mentioning the topic of the conference. After that, he stood up and took his leave, as if he was terrified of staying another second longer. Gavin maintained a composed expression, and since the messenger did not say anything, he did not bother asking about it, either. When the messenger bade farewell, he stood up to send them to the entrance. After the people of the Gilded Kingdom sauntered away, the mages beside Gavin couldn't help but seem indignant. If not for Gavin's presence, they would have long beaten them up. Faced with the complaints of the people under his command, Gavin waved his hand nonchalantly, and instructed them to get to work while he headed to the inverted tower of the Sky Castle through the teleportation portal in the Tower of Dusk. Gavin waited for a short while in the hall of the inverted tower, and happened to see Lin Li coming out of the barbarous arena with the others. Hence, he reported to Lin Li about the visit of the messengers from the Gilded Kingdom, as well as the conference that would take place in Kalon City in 10 days. Gavin, your temper is too good. It's a pity I couldn't make it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have let them leave easily. After countless intense battles, Alan was now full of a murderous aura, and he no longer seemed like a civilized and courteous mage. Gavin smiled at his sarcastic remark, and said, well, there's an upcoming negotiation. If it doesn't go well, you'll have a reason to deal with them. President, will you be taking us with you when the time comes? Seemingly having been tempted by Gavin's words, Alan turned around and asked Lin Li that question smilingly, as if he was asking for a benefit. Clearly, the group of mages, led by Alan, had somewhat turned into avid fans of battles. After experiencing countless battles in the barbarous arena, stroking his chin, Lin Li squinted, and said, yes, we've been here for a long time. It's indeed time to go relax and unwind. However, there are still 10 days to go, so if you guys can advance by another level within these 10 days, I'll take you there, otherwise just stay here. With the shuffling of footsteps, everyone including Alan immediately vanished without a trace. It turned out they scurried to the arena. Seeing this scene, Gavin was a little dumbfounded. It had only been a short while, but all the mages had become fans of partaking in battles. Okay, Gavin, things have recently gotten back on track at the Tower of Dusk. If you have time, drop here often to train. Although it won't make you advance quickly in level, it will definitely be effective for sharpening your combat skills and improving combat power. Gavin was an old member of the Tower of Dusk who had joined since its establishment. Of course, Lin Li would not forget his contributions. Although Gavin had experienced a considerable increase in his strength through the magic tides, his achievements would stagnate there for life if he could not think of a solution to digest it. If he were to enter the barbarous arena and undergo training with lots of actual combat, that would allow Gavin's power, which he had obtained effortlessly, to be fused with his body. Yes, President, I will drop by often in the future as long as I have the time to. Although Gavin was obsessed with getting more power, he knew that practicing magic was the right path for mages, and power, authority, and money were all only superficial, especially when he looked at his peers. Many of the mages who had joined in the same period of time had been constantly improving their strength, and he had long been eager to do so too. After a few words with Gavin, Lin Li resumed his usual routine and continued to challenge stronger opponents in the barbarous arena. Although Lin Li still wasn't able to defeat his 11th opponent until now, he had gained a lot from the sessions, and now he could at least last for a few seconds instead of being finished off instantly like he used to. Lin Li's opponent was a peak sanctuary powerhouse, while Lin Li was only at level 27. Being able to last for a few seconds facing a powerhouse who was at the peak of the sanctuary realm was already an incredible achievement. Others would probably be shocked by what he had done. At this moment, there were 5 battleships from the Gilded Kingdom, docked quietly in the port of Kalon City, which was situated on the southern coast of the Breezy Plains. The port, which was originally rather spacious, was occupied by the 5 battleships, leaving the other merchant ships with no choice but to turn to a smaller port nearby. Kalon City was originally the territory of the Dark Blade. The port was one of the important reasons that the Dark Blade was able to develop to such a scale such that it became the best of the top 10 bandit groups in the Breezy Plains. Later on, the Dark Blade was destroyed by the Tower of Dusk, and thus the Manhwa family took over Kalan City. On the other hand, the Tower of Dusk chose a seemingly abandoned mine near Kalan City instead. At that time, Cheyenne of the Manhwa family was rather puzzled by the Tower of Dusk's decision. After all, it was obvious that a prosperous port would be far more valuable than an abandoned mine. However, Cheyenne regretted his choice soon afterward because the Tower of Dusk managed to found the Terra mine in the abandoned mine. Besides, they also discovered that it was extremely rich in Terra ore. Of course, Cheyenne was also well aware that if the Terra mine truly landed in his hands, it would not be a good thing, because it might cause the Manhwa family to face the disaster of destruction. On a battleship of the Gilded Kingdom, in the port of Kalan City, a few people who were obviously different from underlings were standing leisurely on the deck and watching the scenery that the port offered. With the wealth brought by the port trade, Kalan City was considered a prosperous city in the Breezy Plains. However, even the highest building in the city did not seem to be taller than the deck of the giant battleship of the Gilded Kingdom. Thus, those several people who were standing on the deck could almost have a clear view of the city. The several people on the deck of the battleship were the leaders of the emissaries of the Gilded Kingdom, and the ones who were sent to the Tower of Dusk were just normal messengers. The former had a very high status in the Gilded Kingdom, and they did not think that the president of a force in the Breezy Plains was worthy of their personal invitation. Admiral Nasri, you're being too conscientious. We're just going for a walk. With our battleship in the port, those pieces of garbage would not dare to touch us at all. The one who said that was a handsome blonde-haired man in his 30s, who looked extremely arrogant. The arrogant blonde-haired man was named Kantori, and indeed had the rights to be arrogant. Not only was he the most favored son of the Chancellor of the Gilded Kingdom, he was also a disciple of the priest of the Illuminati. In addition to his noble status, his strength was also a reason for him to be proud. Although he was only in his 30s, he was already a level 24 legendary powerhouse, and an unparalleled genius in the Gilded Kingdom. Admiral Nasri, whom Kantori addressed, was the commander of the fleet on this mission, and the commander-in-chief of the Third Fleet of the Gilded Kingdom. As the commander-in-chief of the Third Fleet of the Gilded Kingdom, Nasri was well aware of the importance of the Gilded Kingdom's navy in this mission to the Breezy Plains. Hence, he dared not be negligent at all. In fact, Nasri originally had the same thoughts as the majority of people in the Gilded Kingdom, and they all thought that their mighty navy would be enough to dominate the Breezy Plains, which was in a state of disunity. However, they did not expect to be dealt a huge blow before they could even implement their plan. Not only did they lose many legendary powerhouses, they also lost 2 giant battleships. After all, the Gilded Kingdom was an island nation in the sea, and wasn't rich in mineral resources, so each giant battleship was very precious to them. This time, the Gilded Kingdom had their sights set on the Breezy Plains, and more specifically, their mineral resources. They hoped to get the minerals they needed from the Breezy Plains. Otherwise, their navy's development would come to a standstill, and if that were to happen, it would affect the entire kingdom greatly. Kantori, we will definitely threaten the interests of the forces of the Breezy Plains this time. We have to be very careful. Nasri shook his head slightly. Kantori had a special identity, and he would be given huge credit for completing the mission, but even if they failed, he would not have to suffer any consequences when he returned. Simply put, he was there for show. However, it was different for Nasri. If the plan failed, then losing their manpower would be a trivial matter, but losing the 2 battleships was a serious issue. If he could not explain the losses, the failure of the mission would be the end of his career. Admiral Nasri, you're overestimating them. I see no need to negotiate at all. If they have the guts to go against us, we'll just destroy all of them. In the Gilded Kingdom, Kantori was the top of his generation because of his noble identity and brilliant talent. Everything had always been smooth sailing for him, and thus he naturally did not take the forces of the Breezy Plains seriously. Kantori's words made Nasri feel rather uncomfortable as he made it sound as if he was timid. Hence, he reminded, don't forget, the forces of the Breezy Plains may be in a state of disunity, but there is a sanctuary powerhouse to support them. I believe you're well aware of how horrifying the sanctuary powerhouses are. That Ashen Warlock is not someone we can deal with using our advantage in artillery. Juri was an elder of the Illuminati. Actually, his status was even more prestigious than that of Nasri, the commander-in-chief of the Third Fleet. Hence, when Nasri directed the topic to Elder Juri, he was hoping that it would restrain Kantori and prevent him from creating trouble. Upon hearing Nasri mention the Ashen Warlock, there was a slight change in Jor's expression, and even Kantori fell silent. Previously, they did not witness the consequences borne by the messengers with their own eyes, but when they saw the messenger who seemed to be on the verge of a mental breakdown, they could imagine how terrifying it was. Generally speaking, to sanctuary powerhouses, those below the sanctuary realm were insignificant minions, and thus they would not hold anything against them. However, the Ashen Warlock was completely different from other sanctuary powerhouses. Not only did he hold it against the insignificant, he even dealt with them harshly, leaving them with no means to survive after offending him. The Ashen Warlock killed them just for offending him, and that was simply an insult to the Gilded Kingdom and the Illuminati. However, after being humiliated, the Gilded Kingdom and the Illuminati had no choice but to grit their teeth and suck it up, not daring to think of revenge at all. Although the Illuminati was also helmed by a sanctuary powerhouse, the elders of the Illuminati dared not mention revenge after checking the ancient literature and learning that even High Lord Osric had been rather afraid of the Ashen Warlock during the Dark Age. However, Cantori was not a fan of history, so he naturally did not know that the Ashen Warlock was a famous figure in history. Hence, after staying silent for a while, his arrogant expression returned, and he nonchalantly said, "There's only one sanctuary powerhouse in the entire Breezy Plains. At most, we'll get teacher to step in and restrain him. Let's see what he can do after we kick him out of the Breezy Plains." After hearing Cantori's words, the expressions of Elder Jory and Nasri turned sullen, as if they were afraid that the Ashen Warlock would hear their words from far away. "Cantori, keep this between us. We'll be in great trouble if the Ashen Warlock hears this. Think about it, even if we get your teacher involved and wipe out the Breezy Plains, won't the Ashen Warlock take revenge on the Gilded Kingdom?" Jory said to Cantori with a stern expression. "Yeah, judging from the way the Ashen Warlock acts, he's really capable of doing anything," Nasri chimed in. "Regardless of the methods he used, he would be given huge credit as long as he could get enough ores from the Breezy Plains. He did not want to create unnecessary trouble. The Ashen Warlock has already made his stand clear. The president of the Tower of Dusk will be talking to us about the matters regarding the Breezy Plains. I think this is a form of compromise, and there's no need for us to continue provoking him," Elder Jory said righteously. He did not know that the president of the Tower of Dusk was not any less ruthless than the Ashen Warlock, and thus thought that the Ashen Warlock was giving him an out. "I hope so." Although Nasri agreed with Elder Jor's words, he vaguely felt that it was a little inappropriate. He had heard that the Ashen Warlock would never leave Grand Town, where he had lived for thousands of years. In that case, was the Ashen Warlock really the one who took the battleship away from the Gilded Kingdom? If it wasn't the Ashen Warlock, wouldn't it mean that there was another sanctuary powerhouse in the Breezy Plains that he didn't know of? However, the Gilded Kingdom's plan was fortunately fully supported by the Illuminati this time. Even though Nasri could not figure out what the Illuminati wanted from the Breezy Plains, he just had to complete the mission. 10 days passed in a flash, and the various forces of the Breezy Plains had also arrived at Kalon City one after another within this period of time. If possible, none of them wanted to provoke a major enemy, like the Gilded Kingdom and the Illuminati. Hence, they were already prepared to fulfill the requests of the Gilded Kingdom and the Illuminati as long as they were not too absurd. As the owner of Kalon City, the Manhwa family became a participant of the negotiation even though they had yet to reach the standards of a top force. They were in charge of preparing everything that was needed for the negotiation and entertaining the representatives of the Breezy Plains. On the other hand, Lin Li and the rest arrived in Kalon City on the 10th day. Since they had become allies with the Manhwa family a long time ago, the latter welcomed and entertained them enthusiastically. Cheyenne's disciple, Hutton, had also joined in to entertain Lin Li. Although Hutton had already stepped into the legendary realm, he was still far inferior to Lin Li. Cheyenne requested Lin Li to take Hutton under his wing and allow Hutton to learn and train in the Tower of Dusk, because there was nothing else he could teach Hutton. Hutton was actually rather talented, and if not for the incredibly elite Lin Li, he would have been a top prodigy of his generation. Hence, Lin Li did not decline, and agreed to Cheyenne's request readily. After this matter ended, Hutton would follow him to the Tower of Dusk to become a student. On the second day that Lin Li and the members of the Tower of Dusk arrived in Kalon City, the negotiation initiated by the Gilded Kingdom began in the City Council Hall in the city center of Kalon City. The dozens of representatives of forces from the Breezy Plains walked into the conference hall one after another, each with a stern expression. Even those who were close to each other did not hold much of a conversation. Even though the negotiation had yet to officially begin, they could still vaguely guess the intentions of the Gilded Kingdom. Clearly, the Gilded Kingdom was intending to encroach on the Breezy Plains. If it was just the Gilded Kingdom, the forces of the Breezy Plains would not have much scruple about it. After all, the Felon Kingdom failed to subdue the Breezy Plains back then, not to mention the Gilded Kingdom, which was situated in the sea. However, the Gilded Kingdom was supported by the Illuminati, which was an ancient force that was not inferior to the Brilliant Shrine. The Breezy Plains was of a limited size, and the forces there had already distributed all of the local resources evenly. The Gilded Kingdom, which was a foreign force, was obviously trying to snatch away some benefits from each of the forces, and that was something that no other force was willing to accept. Back when the Tower of Dusk had risen, it had already taken away a huge portion of benefits from each of the forces. The Gilded Kingdom definitely had a greater appetite than the Tower of Dusk. Although some members of a few forces in the breezy plains had become sanctuary powerhouses thanks to the magic tides, they were all well aware that those who entered the sanctuary realm, using the power of the magic tides, could never be compared to true sanctuary powerhouses. Hence, none of them had the courage to go against the Gilded Kingdom. If they were to provoke the true sanctuary powerhouses of the Illuminati, it would be too late to regret. The representatives of the many powers entered the conference hall and took their seats, each looking as if they were about to be sent to the torture chamber. In fact, it was quite the case. They waited for more than half an hour before the envoys of the Gilded Kingdom entered the conference hall. The one who took the lead was Kantori, the son of the Chancellor of the Gilded Kingdom, followed by Elder Jory of the Illuminati, Nasri the Commander-in-Chief of the Third Fleet, and a few administrative staff, who were holding several documents. After sitting in the main seat of the conference hall, Kantori looked up at the crowd and cleared his throat gently with his chin raised before saying, "Everyone is present, right? In this case, let's move on to the main topic of the conference." Deep down, Kantori did not think much of these local forces. Even though they were the so-called top forces, they could not compare to the mighty Gilded Kingdom and the ancient force, the Illuminati. Hence, he did not take the negotiation seriously, either, and simply felt that it was redundant. He felt that the forces would never dare to defy him once he raised his conditions. Envoy Kantori, the members of the Tower of Dusk have yet to arrive. Should we wait a little? The representative of a certain force reminded cautiously. Hearing that the people from the Tower of Dusk actually hadn't arrived yet, Kantori's face turned sullen immediately. He deliberately decided to be late for more than half an hour, all because he wanted to show his dominance. However, he did not expect the Tower of Dusk to make him wait. The Tower of Dusk, aren't they just one of the forces of the breezy plains? Since they're not taking this conference seriously, we don't have to wait for them, Kantori said with a hostile expression. In his opinion, there were many forces in the breezy plains, and the Tower of Dusk did not matter at all. Since they were late, he would make them bear the consequences for their unpunctuality later. However, Elder Jory stopped Kantori at this moment and said, "We'd better wait a little longer. After all, they are also a force of the breezy plains. Let's discuss when everyone is present." Elder Jory did not say that because he had a good temper, but because he had recalled the words of the messenger, whose life was spared by the Ashen Warlock. He did not think that the Ashen Warlock would appoint a random person to represent him. Clearly, the president of the Tower of Dusk was valued highly by the Ashen Warlock. Kantori frowned and was about to say something to Elder Jory, but he suddenly heard footsteps approaching outside the door. However, the footsteps were not hurried, and the newcomers finally appeared in the conference hall, only after a few minutes. The people who arrived were Lin Li, followed by Basil and Alan. Despite arriving late at the conference hall, the trio entered without explaining anything to anyone, went straight to the end of the hall, and sat down at the exact spot facing Kantori and the others. "Who are you people? Why did you barge into the conference hall without permission?" Kantori flew into a rage as soon as he saw the attitude of Lin Li and his companions. "He's just the president of a small local force, and yet he has the audacity to make me wait. Not only was he late, he didn't bother apologizing, either. How rude." Hence, despite having guessed Lin Li's identity, Kantori nonetheless tried to take Lin Li a notch down in front of the representatives of the forces. Lin Li was not bothered by Kantori's words at all. Without uttering a single word, he simply looked up and glanced at Kantori with disdain. Even though Kantori could be considered an elite of the younger generation, because he managed to reach level 24 at such a young age, Lin Li only regarded him as an insignificant nobody. However, Kantori did not think so. Being the son of the Chancellor of the Gilded Kingdom, and the favorite disciple of the priest of the Illuminati, he could be considered the best of the younger generation of the Gilded Kingdom, and had never been treated with such contempt. The wisp of disdain in Lin Li's eyes immediately made him feel as if he had been humiliated, and an uncontrollable anger overwhelmed him in an instant. Bang! Kantori slammed his hand hard against the table and suddenly sprung up, intending to chase the members of the Tower of Dusk out of the conference hall. However, before Kantori even said anything, Elder Jory, who was beside him, stood up as well. He urged, "Enough. Since they're here, let's get to the main topic." At the same time, he was also hinting implicitly to Kantori that the young president of the Tower of Dusk was not simple. After getting Elder Jory's hint, Kantori finally noticed the unusual mana fluctuations coming from the body of the young president of the Tower of Dusk. The fluctuations were not dense and ferocious. On the contrary, They were somewhat subtle and almost hard to detect. Kantori was not entirely clueless, and he didn't think that the president of the Tower of Dusk was an ordinary person without any power. In this case, the only possibility would be that he was in the sanctuary realm, but he seems to be only in his early 20s. How can he have already stepped into the sanctuary realm? Kantori turned to look at Elder Jory doubtfully, only to see a look of certainty and affirmation in the latter's eyes. Kantori could not bring himself to go on. Although he was not intimidated, he did have some scruples. After all, the pride of a sanctuary powerhouse was not to be trampled on. Although he might not be afraid of Lin Li, since he had a powerful team, he might suffer heavy losses if he failed to get a satisfactory outcome from the negotiation. At the thought of this, Kantori glared at Lin Li with hatred, sat back down indignantly, and said, "Okay, since everyone is here, let's get to the main topic. This time, I'm here on behalf of the Gilded Kingdom, and I gathered you all here with the intention of discussing with you the acquisition of mineral resources. These are the mineral resources that we have selected after the survey, and the prices we offer respectively. Please take a look. If there is no problem, hurry up and sign the transfer contract." Upon hearing Kantori's words, the administrative staff of the Gilded Kingdom handed a copy of the document to the representatives of each of the forces. There were dozens of representatives of the forces attending the conference, including the Tower of Dusk. Each force was given a copy, thus showing the enormous appetite of the Gilded Kingdom. The representatives of the various forces did not feel much at first, and they thought that since the Gilded Kingdom had surveyed the mines, they ought to be aware of their value, and would not offer any ridiculous prices. However, when they opened the documents, they were dumbfounded to see the prices offered for their mines. What, 50,000 gold coins? The value of our daily production output is higher than this. What a joke. You want to purchase our mine with 20,000 gold coins. This is daylight robbery. The numbers here must have been written wrongly. The reserves in these two mines are enough to last for hundreds of years, and we're only being offered 100,000 gold coins. Since when has Rodita become cheaper than soil? The conference hall, which was initially relatively quiet, immediately became noisier than a fish market, and the representatives of various forces could hardly believe their eyes. Not to mention that their forces did not intend to sell their mines. The prices offered by the Gilded Kingdom were simply outrageous. It was plain robbery. On the Tower of Dusk's side, Alan looked at the information they had received, and couldn't help but smirk a little, revealing a mocking smile. In the information given by the Gilded Kingdom, it was stated that the Tower of Dusk owned 5 mines, 2 of which were Terra mines, while the other 3 were mines that produced precious magical metals. However, the prices offered were pathetically low. They wondered if it was because the Gilded Kingdom was so poor that they could only afford such a low sum of money, or if the people of the Gilded Kingdom thought that the people of the Breezy Plains were so poor that they had never seen gold coins before. President, look at the way the people of the Gilded Kingdom are behaving. Can we? After reading the documents, Alan did not become enraged like the representatives of the other forces. Instead, there was a look of excitement in his eyes. Previously, the messengers that the Gilded Kingdom had sent had fortunately encountered Gavin, who had a good temper, and thus could escape unscathed. However, almost all the mages who were led by Alan were battle fanatics, who had long wanted to look for a chance to deal with the people of the Gilded Kingdom. Hence, after seeing that the Gilded Kingdom had raised such unacceptable conditions, Alan immediately thought of getting into a battle with them. It was not only because of the arrogance of the people of the Gilded Kingdom, but also because of the fact that they had sieged the Tower of Dusk and destroyed their mine. Even though the ones who sieged the Tower of Dusk and destroyed their mine had been killed by Lin Li, Alan and the other battle fanatics felt that there were still scores to settle. At this moment, everyone in the conference hall was filled with excitement. The representatives of the various forces had almost forgotten the identity of the envoys of the Gilded Kingdom as they were incredibly agitated, and had begun cursing their hearts out. They continuously berated the Gilded Kingdom for being shameless robbers, and trying to rip them off. However, in the face of the accusations of the crowd, Kantori's expression did not change at all. He simply glanced at them, and raised his chin while condescendingly saying, "I'm telling you, it's your honor that the Gilded Kingdom wants the resources that you have. We're already showing you due respect by offering to pay you. That's all we're going to offer. Hurry up and sign the transfer contract. If you're too greedy, you might not get a single gold coin at all." How is this a damn negotiation? This is daylight robbery. The faces of every representative of the forces turned sullen. However, other than cursing and exasperation, they dared not behave too outrageously. After all, they were facing the Gilded Kingdom and the Illuminati. No matter how displeased they might be, they dared not stand up to them at all. Standing up for someone else now did not guarantee that others would stand up for them too when they were in trouble. However, at the thought of this, they couldn't help but turn to look at the Tower of Dusk. Gradually, silence was restored in the conference hall again. The representatives of various forces were almost all behaving in the same way. They were looking at Lin Li and thinking, didn't you want us to submit to the Tower of Dusk back then? Now that the people from the Gilded Kingdom are here to rob us, shouldn't you be standing up for us, the forces that have submitted to you? Besides, they all knew that the Tower of Dusk had to stand out even if they didn't want to. After all, although the forces were all rich in mineral resources, there was a huge difference in value compared to the Tower of Dusk's Terra mine. The Tower of Dusk would definitely not be willing to sell the precious Terra mine to the Gilded Kingdom like it was garbage. Sure enough, under the expectant gazes of the crowd, the trio of the Tower of Dusk, led by Lin Li, suddenly stood up from their seats. However, to their surprise, Lin Li and the others did not curse at the envoys of the Gilded Kingdom. In fact, they didn't seem angry at all. Instead, they were smiling vaguely. Why? Do you have an opinion? Kantori questioned, his heart tensing up when he saw Lin Li stand up. However, he gradually relaxed again. He didn't think that Lin Li would have the guts to go harm him, an envoy of the Gilded Kingdom. If he were to do that, it would be akin to declaring war on the Gilded Kingdom and the Illuminati. In Kantori's opinion, even the mysterious Ashen Warlock would not dare to really go against the Gilded Kingdom. Otherwise, he wouldn't have pushed the responsibility to a small force like the Tower of Dusk. Hence, the shock and intimidation in Kantori's eyes only lasted for a fleeting moment, before quickly turning into an arrogant and condescending gaze. However, what everyone including Kantori did not expect was that Lin Li left with Basil and Alan after standing up, without saying anything at all. When the three of them disappeared in the entrance of the conference hall, all the people in the conference hall looked at each other in puzzlement. None of them could understand what the Tower of Dusk's representatives were trying to express. Did they find the prices unacceptable? You should at least say something. Otherwise, how would I know if you're willing or not? Since it's a negotiation, there has to be communication. What's the point of a silent protest? However, Lin Li's intention was to give the crowd a wake-up call. Since the Gilded Kingdom had offered such harsh conditions that were unacceptable by their standards, he decided to give them a scare. Since the representatives of the Tower of Dusk were the first to leave, the people of the Gilded Kingdom would not hold it against them even if they developed some resentment. Hence, the representatives of the various powers in the conference hall tacitly chose not to say anything to the members of the Gilded Kingdom, as they retreated and fell silent like a tide. In the blink of an eye, the conference hall became empty, leaving only the members of the Gilded Kingdom, who were led by Kantori. This bunch of fools who don't know any better. What are they trying to do? Looking at the empty conference hall, Kantori was so infuriated that he was almost going to flip the tables. In his opinion, the Gilded Kingdom and the Illuminati definitely had what it took to dominate the entire Breezy Plains, and they were being kind enough to offer some monetary compensation in exchange for their mines. In the Gilded Kingdom, the trade unions and forces were all willing to pay a huge sum of money to the senior executives of the Gilded Kingdom for the sake of cozying up to them. However, the people of the Breezy Plains were not only ungrateful for the terms they offered, they even created such a scene. It was truly absurd to him. It seems that the Ashen Warlock had his reasons for asking us to talk to the president of the Tower of Dusk. Elder Jory frowned a little and stroked his beard, feeling a little helpless about the situation in front of him. In fact, deep down, he also felt that the conditions that had been presumptuously set by Kantori were indeed somewhat inappropriate. However, it was a negotiation, after all, and it was meant for them to reach a consensus. It was too rude of the president of the Tower of Dusk to leave without partaking in the negotiation. Elder Jory, I think we should skip the negotiation altogether. We'll decide after letting them see our power. Let's assert our dominance using the Tower of Dusk. By then, everyone will sign the contract obediently, Kantori said while gritting his teeth, wishing that he could destroy the Tower of Dusk and trample all over the ignorant president of the Tower of Dusk. However, Elder Jory did not quite approve of Kantori's words, and thus shook his head, and said, if I'm not wrong, the young president of the Tower of Dusk should be a powerhouse who has already stepped into the sanctuary realm. However, with our current power, it won't be easy to deal with the Tower of Dusk. HMPH, he's just a pseudo-sanctuary powerhouse. If it wasn't for my teacher's request, I could have stepped into the sanctuary realm by now too. Of course, Kantori wouldn't believe that there would be anyone who was more talented than him in this world. He naturally thought that there was an 80% chance that Lin Li could have stepped into the sanctuary realm only because of the power of the magic tides. Pseudo-sanctuary powerhouses would only have an increase in lifespan, and their power was essentially no different from that of those who were at the peak of the legendary realm. In fact, they could be easily killed in a siege by a few powerhouses who were at the peak of the legendary realm. The Gilded Kingdom must enter the Breezy Plains Nobody and no force can stop us. I believe they'll come to us and initiate another negotiation once they've figured this out. Let's keep them in suspense for a few days. They'll definitely panic. Resorting to violence is not the best option. After all, you have to bear heavy consequences for dealing with a sanctuary powerhouse. We might as well wait for them to bow down voluntarily when they're compelled by the circumstances. Nasri did not want to lose any more manpower, and pseudo-sanctuary powerhouses were far inferior to actual sanctuary powerhouses. Elder Jory nodded slightly, apparently agreeing with Nasri's words more. He said, "Not bad. The forces in the breezy plains are disunited, and if we are too overbearing, we might end up prompting them to unite instead. The Leaden Kingdom and the Felon Kingdom are examples. Besides, our roots are out in the sea, and other than using battleships to dominate the ocean, we can't use other means. It'd be much more difficult to send our troops to enter the mainland than the Leaden Kingdom and the Felon Kingdom." After the members of the Gilded Kingdom chatted for a while in the empty conference hall and analyzed the current situation, they all thought that as long as they kept those forces in suspense for a few days, they would know how powerful the Gilded Kingdom was, as well as their intentions to enter the breezy plains, and would then come crying to beg for another negotiation. Hence, Cantori did not take the slip-up to heart, and simply waited for the forces to settle the issue with him. When Cantori and the others left the conference hall, they were no longer sulking, and instead looked rather triumphant. Cantori was initially still planning to go to the entertainment joints in Kalan City for some fun, but after much persuasion by Nasri, he decided to return to the battleship in the port. They were just waiting for the forces of the breezy plains to apologize to them and sincerely ask for another negotiation. On the third day after returning to the battleship, Cantori and the others were leisurely, sipping wine and enjoying the sea breeze. All of a sudden, Nasri's adjutant hurried over, saluted them, and approached Nasri to speak to him softly. After hearing the report, Nasri's smile stiffened, and it was as if there were suddenly gloomy clouds in the clear sky. Seeing the changes in Nasri's expressions, Cantori, who was chatting with Elder Jory, immediately showed his displeasure. He didn't think that something major had happened, but he was displeased with his whispering. Hence, he sternly questioned, "Admiral Nasri, is there something that you have to hide from us?" Nasri calmed himself down, and said to the adjutant, "Tell Envoy Cantori and Elder Jory what you told me just now." "Envoy Cantori, Elder Jory, here's what happened. Just now, I received some news that one of the battleships we sent back home got attacked during the journey." The adjutant was a little terrified and flustered. Although he held a high position, he was far inferior to the several envoys in front of him. Although he would not be held liable, since he was just an adjutant, he knew clearly that if the big shots were to pursue the matter, they could blame anyone. What? The battleship got attacked? Where? Could there be a powerful sea beast? The ocean was dominated by the Gilded Kingdom, and no one could compare to the Gilded Kingdom in the sea other than a few gigantic sea beasts that were hidden in the depths of the ocean. Hence, when he heard that the battleship had been attacked, the first thought that came to Cantori's mind was that the battleship had been attacked by the sea beasts. However, the adjutant shook his head after hearing Cantori's question, and said, "Envoy, the ones who attacked us were not sea beasts, but a large and powerful battleship." The naval troopers who were lucky to survive said that the flag of the Tower of Dusk was hung on the battleship. "Impossible. How can there be a battleship in this world that's more powerful than ours? Even the Leaden Kingdom and the Felon Kingdom don't have any. The Tower of Dusk is a local force. How can they have such a battleship? Could it be that those naval troops have messed up and are trying to shirk responsibility?" Although Cantori was not from the Navy, he was extremely confident in their battleships. He was not blindly confident. In fact, the Gilded Kingdom could become the hegemon of the seas all because of their powerful battleships that had been incorporated with alchemy. They dominated the seas and would win every battle. Even ferocious sea beasts would turn into the prey of the battleships. Although the Leaden Kingdom and the Felon Kingdom all had some troops on the coastlines, their investment in the navy was rather pathetic, and their so-called battleships were garbage that would shatter upon touch. They were not fit to be compared to the fleet of the Gilded Kingdom at all. If the Gilded Kingdom had had a powerful land army, they would have barged straight into the Leaden Kingdom and Felon Kingdom with cannons. Cantori and the others thought that the Tower of Dusk was just a new, emerging force in the Dulan region that might not even be able to create a wooden ship, let alone a battleship that was comparable to that of the Gilded Kingdom. "No, Envoy, according to the naval troopers that survived, the enemy's battleship seems to be very similar to the one of ours that went missing. Besides, they were the ones who boarded the ship first and sank the battleship after looting all the supplies on our battleship." Under the pressure of Cantori, The adjutant felt his legs shaking together with his voice. "It's our missing battleship, atrocious. It must have been given to them by that old fogey Ashen Warlock. Their battleship being robbed was simply humiliating for them." Kantori was so infuriated that he smashed the table into bits, and turned to say to Nasri, "Admiral Nasri, since they have the audacity to provoke us, don't you plan to do something about it?" Two battleships of the Gilded Kingdom went missing in the Felon Kingdom and the Breezy Plains, respectively. They determined that the one in the Felon Kingdom went missing because of the arbitrators of the Supreme Council, while the one in the Breezy Plains went missing because of the Ashen Warlock. In their opinion, only a true powerhouse like the Ashen Warlock could take over their battleship. Now, the flag of the Tower of Dusk was hanging on the battleship, and thus they thought that the battleship was given to them by the Ashen Warlock. At this moment, Nasri was just as infuriated as Kantori. After all, the two battleships belonged to his forces, and as the commander of the Third Fleet, he had an unshirkable responsibility in this matter. However, he did not flare up like Kantori, and instead suppressed his anger while saying to his adjutant, "Spread the news to the staff so that they can come up with a plan for an assault as soon as possible. The Gilded Kingdom's pride cannot be stained by others." Nasri did not issue that order because he let his anger get the better of him and had lost his rationality. Otherwise, he would have instructed them to launch the cannons on the battleship and blast the entire Kalan city. In Nasri's opinion, the enemies would not be able to operate the battleship skillfully without 5 to 6 years of training. Hence, if he could recapture the battleship, he would not only be able to make up for his previous mistakes, the battleship might also be able to play a significant role in this negotiation. However, Elder Jory stopped the adjutant who was about to go and relay his orders. With a frown, he said to Nasri, "Wait, Admiral Nasri, it might not be appropriate for me to butt in regarding the military affairs, but I have to say that the most important thing for us to do now is to obtain what we need peacefully. Once we start a battle, the following negotiations process might be detrimental to us." In fact, what worried Elder Jory the most was not starting a battle with the forces of the Breezy Plains. They all felt that the battleship was seized by the Ashen Warlock and given to the Tower of Dusk. That meant that the Ashen Warlock and the Tower of Ashes had an extraordinary relationship. If they got into a battle with the Tower of Dusk, they might provoke the Ashen Warlock, and they might not get any benefits with their current strength. In fact, they initiated the negotiation in a bid to obtain the resources they needed from each force peacefully. However, they faced the deterrence of the Ashen Warlock. Otherwise, how could the people of the Gilded Kingdom and the Illuminati possibly sit together to negotiate calmly with the local forces? What do we do, then? Are we supposed to just put up with it? Since when had Kantori ever suffered such a loss? He was naturally indignant. Elder Jory sneered and stroked his beard. He coldly said, "Isn't the president of the Tower of Dusk in Kalan City?" There was no progress in the negotiation this time, all because he decided to leave all of a sudden. "This time, although we have suffered heavy losses, we can make up for them if we can get the 2 Terra mines from the Tower of Dusk." Upon hearing this, Kantori and Nasri seemed enlightened. The attack that the Tower of Dusk launched on them might have caused them to suffer heavy losses, but if they had a bargaining chip, they would be able to use it to force the Tower of Dusk into compromising in the following negotiation. "Okay, in this case, go and inform the people in the Breezy Plains. I will see what the people of the Tower of Dusk can say during this negotiation." After having figured it out, Kantori immediately instructed his subordinates to inform the representatives of the forces in the Breezy Plains to start a new negotiation. At the same time, a giant battleship that had characteristics which were unique to the Gilded Kingdom appeared in the sea region outside Kalan City. However, it was slowly sailing in one direction under the flag of the Tower of Dusk. Several mages stood on the deck of the battleship, wearing the identity badges of the Tower of Dusk. The one taking the lead was Alan, who was in charge of the mages of the Tower of Dusk. After attacking the battleship of the Gilded Kingdom, Alan did not command them to leave the sea region immediately. He even deliberately set off a lifeboat, hoping that the Gilded Kingdom could send another battleship after getting the news. He was not being conceited. Although their battleship was from the Gilded Kingdom, the performance had increased greatly after it was modified by Lin Li and Angelano. Although the battleship was fused with alchemy, it initially needed hundreds of skilled sailors to operate. However, after Lin Li modified it, the operation of the battleship became much simpler, and only required less than 20 mages to operate. In addition to simpler operation, the battleship's mana cannons were also furnished with legendary magical crystals. Besides, Lin Li also decorated the battleship with some Guru-level mageths and Guru-level alchemy arrays, which made the battleship become a genuine unsinkable fortress in the sea. Even if the Gilded Kingdom sent 5 giant battleships, Alan would be confident of escaping unscathed after causing them to suffer huge losses. In fact, even if they faced a sanctuary powerhouse, the battleship would still be able to sustain the enemy attacks for a period of time and allow the mages of the Tower of Dusk to leave through the teleportation portal in the armored superstructure of the battleship. However, Alan and the others unfortunately did not see the Gilded Kingdom's battleships even after waiting for a long time. They had no choice but to return helplessly. The battleship of the Tower of Dusk naturally could not be docked in the port of Kalan City. Alan left his men behind to guard the battleship while he disembarked. Within just half an hour, he returned to Kalan City and reported all the gains to Lin Li. When Alan was done with reporting, the people of the Manhwa family happened to return with the news regarding the Gilded Kingdom's decision to start a new negotiation. Aren't the people of the Gilded Kingdom very arrogant? Why didn't they react after getting a slap in the face? Clearly, Alan was not satisfied with the gains today, and he was hoping that the people of the Gilded Kingdom would lose their temper, thus giving him an excuse to kill them. Don't worry, there will be a chance later, Lin Li said nonchalantly while flipping through the Book of Eternity. He felt that the arrogant people of the Gilded Kingdom would not let the matter go just like that. Perhaps that matter had influenced them to suddenly decide to hold another round of negotiation. However, Lin Li was not bothered by the reactions of the Gilded Kingdom. Anyway, he did not plan to let the Tower of Dusk suffer any losses during the negotiation this time. Indeed, as soon as the negotiation on the second day began, Kantori, the envoy of the Gilded Kingdom, began questioning the members of the Tower of Dusk in exasperation. Initially, Kantori intended to be a little gentlemanly when he thought about his plan yesterday. However, when he saw the people of the Tower of Dusk, he immediately lost his cool. Before the members of the Tower of Dusk sat down, he immediately slammed his hand on the table and stood up. Glaring at Lin Li with bloodshot eyes, he barked masterfully. The cargo battleship that we used yesterday was attacked by the Tower of Dusk in the sea. How do you explain yourself? Do you really want to get the entire Breezy Plains involved in a war? Fortunately, Kantori was not angered to the point of losing his sanity, and he still remembered to include the entire Breezy Plains when berating the members of the Tower of Dusk. He even wanted to make the other forces of the Breezy Plains to turn against the Tower of Dusk. They were trying to make it seem like they were sincere about negotiating with them, but the Tower of Dusk's actions were getting in the way. Kantori thought that the representatives of various powers would definitely stand up and accuse the members of the Tower of Dusk for failing to spare a thought for others and looking at things from the bigger picture. But to his surprise, the truth was far from what he imagined. After hearing his words, the representatives of those forces not only did not glare at the Tower of Dusk, they even looked at them with contempt. I knew it. That president of the Tower of Dusk definitely won't just leave so simply. It's the Gilded Kingdom's turn to be doomed this time. In the conference hall, almost all of the representatives of the various forces developed the same thought at the same time. They understood Lin Li's means very well, and had even had first-hand experience with him. They knew that although the young president of the Tower of Dusk was not too vengeful, those who offended him and the Tower of Dusk would all face a terrible end. Of course, on the other hand, these forces also hoped that the relationship between the Gilded Kingdom and the Tower of Dusk would be strained further. Although they would not really start a war, they should at least be opposing each other. Only then could forces like them reap more benefits. After all, they were not too pleased with having to bow down to others. Faced with Kantori's questioning, Lin Li nonchalantly returned to his seat before calmly saying, "Is it that difficult to understand? We've been negotiating for such a long time, but there hasn't been an outcome, so that makes us foes. Isn't it normal to attack your enemy's battleship? Envoy, you're making a mountain out of a molehill." What? Making a mountain out of a molehill? Upon hearing Lin Li's answer, Kantori was almost infuriated to the point of vomiting blood. To the Gilded Kingdom, the losses that they incurred this time could not be measured in gold coins at all. Putting aside the value of the battleship that had been captured, the resources that were transported on the battleship were all rare magical metals, and other resources that they had spent a lot of effort to collect, and were all very important to the Gilded Kingdom. President Falik, we originally came with sincere intentions, but your behavior is beyond the threshold of our tolerance. I hope that you can formally apologize to us and compensate us for our losses. Perhaps we might be able to continue with the negotiation if you do. Otherwise, seeing that Kantori was so infuriated that he had begun to be in a disarray, Nasri decided to step out and request the Tower of Dusk to apologize and compensate them. Lin Li remained seated and simply glanced at Nasri before disdainfully saying, "You're being ridiculous. Since we're enemies, it's natural for each of us to use our own means. Since you are not satisfied with the fact that we attacked your battleship, you can deploy your men to attack the Tower of Dusk. As long as you can capture the Tower of Dusk, trust me, you'll definitely gain more than what you've lost." Why would there be someone like that in this world? He actually encouraged his enemies to attack his base camp. Lin Li's reply instantly caused the several people from the Gilded Kingdom to be stunned. No one expected the representative of the Tower of Dusk to be so obstinate and unreasonable. Did they really have to go and attack the Tower of Dusk? Elder Jory could not help but smile bitterly. The people from the Illuminati had coveted the Tower of Dusk before, and they were the ones who instigated the people from Garesco City to attack the Tower of Dusk previously. However, even when the president of the Tower of Dusk had yet to return and the Sky Castle had not appeared yet, the other forces were not able to invade them because of the inconspicuous power of the Tower of Dusk. Hence, it was obvious how strong the Tower of Dusk's defensive power was. Not to mention, they now had a Sky Castle and a sanctuary powerhouse for a president. The Tower of Dusk's attitude was very clear. They openly admitted to attacking the Gilded Kingdom, and even taunted them to beat them up if they were displeased with it. Clearly, the Gilded Kingdom wanted to use this matter to make the Tower of Dusk give in, but that was already impossible. Hence, when the exasperated Cantori was thinking of saying something ruthless, Elder Jory pulled him back in time, and said to Lin Li, "Masterfully, you are right, we haven't reached a consensus after an entire day of negotiations, so that puts us in a hostile relationship with each other. In this case, I hope that we can reach a satisfactory agreement, lest something terrible happens again in the future." Damn it, did I hear wrong? Are the people of the Gilded Kingdom so timid? You are a mighty envoy of a large nation in the sea. Why did you become such a coward after some rebuttal? Elder Jor's words made the people in the conference hall find it hard to believe their ears. They're the Gilded Kingdom and the Illuminati. Why would they do something so embarrassing? The people of the Gilded Kingdom pretended not to see the bizarre gazes that were cast on them, and temporarily put aside the matters regarding the Tower of Dusk. They then officially began the negotiation. However, although the Tower of Dusk had humiliated them, the Gilded Kingdom did not compromise on the negotiation terms. The terms they offered this time were still as harsh as before, as they wanted to acquire the resources of the various forces at extremely low prices. Although the terms that the Gilded Kingdom offered were rather harsh, the representatives of various forces did not react as intensely as before. Instead, they proceeded with the heated negotiation, as if they took the terms seriously. In particular, with the matters between the Tower of Dusk and the Gilded Kingdom, the representatives of the various forces also knew that the Gilded Kingdom indeed did not want to start a battle, and so offered terms that were so harsh that a negotiation was mandatory. Although the forces of the Breezy Plains had always been xenophobic, they were not very resistant towards the Gilded Kingdom entering the Breezy Plains. Most importantly, it was because of the existence of the Tower of Dusk, a powerful rising force that only the Gilded Kingdom could contend with. The forces of the Breezy Plains did not want to live subservient to the Tower of Dusk again. Hence, in this negotiation, the representatives of the various forces also showed a certain amount of sincerity, but because the conditions offered by the Gilded Kingdom were truly unacceptable, they had not been able to reach a consensus. If the conditions offered by the Gilded Kingdom were acceptable by their standards, there would probably be an outcome soon. However, the Gilded Kingdom did not want to pay too high of a price. In their opinion, they were showing the country bumpkins of the Breezy Plains enough respect by chatting with them calmly. Others were all coveting a chance to suck up to the Gilded Kingdom and the Illuminati. Hence, in terms of the acquisition price, the Gilded Kingdom refused to give in, and only agreed to offer them some benefits in sea trade. However, only a small number of forces of the Breezy Plains were situated along the sea. Those resources the kingdom demanded were the foundation of everyone, and sea trade had nothing much to do with them at all. Even the forces near the sea had never relied on sea trade as their main source of income. The benefits that the Gilded Kingdom offered basically didn't matter much. Of course, the forces of the Breezy Plains did not really want gold coins. If they really wanted gold coins, they would not need to let go of their resources at all. As long as they had the mines, they would be able to earn a massive number of gold coins. Since the Gilded Kingdom was not willing to pay them the amount of gold coins that those resources were worth, the various forces would naturally have to make up for the discrepancy in other aspects. Although the forces of the Breezy Plains did not need the sea trade benefits that the Gilded Kingdom had offered, the Gilded Kingdom had more than just those resources. For example, they had commercial contracts in other aspects, and a high demand for manufacturing, all of which were more attractive than the gold coins. However, the attitude of the envoys of the Gilded Kingdom was very vehement, and they kept giving excuses by saying that the technology was a top secret of the kingdom, or that it would harm the interests of the country's merchants, and so on. In short, they rejected all of the requests of the forces of the Breezy Plains. Negotiations had always involved several exchanges of offers and bargaining before reaching a consensus that both parties could accept. However, the Gilded Kingdom refused to give out a single gold coin at all. While the forces of Breezy Plains continuously compromised and lowered their demands, they could not put their foundation at risk. After some meaningless bickering, the focus of the negotiations was once again placed on the Gilded Kingdom and the Tower of Dusk. The various forces of the breezy plains wanted to see what the Tower of Dusk would do to help them achieve more benefits. The Gilded Kingdom could also tell that the forces were waiting to see the Tower of Dusk's attitude. As long as they could subdue the Tower of Dusk, it would be easy to deal with the other forces. President Felix, I can understand that the Tower of Dusk attacked our battleship because we were enemies, but now that we're sitting together for a negotiation, shouldn't you show some sincerity too? At this moment, Kantori had calmed down quite a bit, and although he was still thinking about how he should settle scores with the Tower of Dusk, he did not reveal any emotions on his face. Lin Li looked at the other party calmly, amused, and asked, "Oh, what does sincerity mean to you?" "Firstly, regarding the damage caused by your attack on our battleship, I hope that you can make up for it by returning our goods to us and compensating us. Also, you still have one of our benefits, and no matter who gave that battleship to you, I hope you can return it to us too." At this moment, Kantori finally said all the words that he had prepared long ago after the discussion yesterday. It would be fine if they did not apologize. Since they were enemies, it was inevitable for them to attack each other. However, since they were sitting down for a negotiation, they had to express some sincerity, and it was inevitable to discuss compensation. The representatives of the Gilded Kingdom were still hoping to get some compensation and take the Terra mines from the Tower of Dusk. Naturally, they would not forget it just because of Lin Li's words. "Of course, we can discuss the compensation as long as you transfer both your mines according to our conditions." Kantori's tone was very confident because he knew that the members of the Tower of Dusk would not have sat down to negotiate if they had been really inconvincible. Clearly, they would not be willing to start a war with the Gilded Kingdom. The Tower of Dusk was supported by the Ashen Warlock, but the Gilded Kingdom was supported by the Illuminati. No matter how brutal the Ashen Warlock was, would he really fight the powerful Illuminati for the Tower of Dusk? However, just when Kantori got to the point, Lin Li stood up and left with his people without bidding anyone goodbye. "Hey!" Before Kantori even finished speaking, they unexpectedly left. He was suddenly at a loss for what to do, and his face turned beet red. Lin Li and the others walked away very simply, while the people who remained in the conference hall were really dumbfounded. Even a fool could see that the young president of the Tower of Dusk did not take the negotiation to heart. They simply did not care if it was going to be a peaceful coexistence or an intense war. However, be it the Gilded Kingdom or the forces in the breezy plains, none of them dared to negotiate without the Tower of Dusk. Kantori sat there awkwardly for a long time before coming to his senses, wanting to curse but not knowing what to say. The behavior of the members of the Tower of Dusk made him feel really infuriated and dejected as he didn't know how he should go about dealing with them. Although the Gilded Kingdom had a strong deterrence force, they were well aware that they could not really start a war with the breezy plains. Putting aside the Ashen Warlock, even the Leaden Kingdom and the Felon Kingdom would not sit back and watch the Gilded Kingdom invade the breezy plains. Actually, the Gilded Kingdom needed that negotiation more than the forces in the breezy plains. That was also the reason they put on a domineering front as soon as they appeared, vehemently refusing to give any concessions, because they knew that once they let up, there would be a chance that their opponents would realize the situation that they were in. By then, those forces would definitely be even more aggressive. However, what Kantori and the rest did not expect was that the young president of the Tower of Dusk did not care about the so-called forceful deterrence of the Gilded Kingdom. He was either confident that he could deal with the Gilded Kingdom, or had already seen through the facade of the Gilded Kingdom's envoys, and knew that they were only pretending to be intimidating. However, regardless of the reason, they'd already caused Kantori and the others to fall into a dilemma. In that case, could they leave the Tower of Dusk out and reach an agreement with the forces of the breezy plains? If the Tower of Dusk was just an ordinary local force, there would naturally be no problem with doing that. However, the Tower of Ashes was not an ordinary local force. How could they have the rights to replace a powerhouse like the Ashen Warlock? At this moment, Kantori and the others finally realized that the Tower of Dusk that they did not take seriously had actually put them in such a tricky situation. They also played an extremely important role in their plan. In fact, it could be said that they would determine the success or failure of the whole plan. Therefore, although Kantori was incredibly infuriated and frustrated, there was nothing he could do about the Tower of Dusk. This time, the representatives of the various forces did not leave together with the members of the Tower of Dusk, but neither they nor the Gilded Kingdom were interested in continuing with the negotiation. Due to Lin Li's departure, the negotiation had to end fruitlessly again. Kantori and the others could no longer be bothered to bid the others goodbye as they hurriedly left the conference hall. The representatives of the various forces remained seated. They were also dumbfounded by the sudden turn of events. Previously, they had thought that it was just a negotiation tactic of the young president of the Tower of Dusk, but this time they felt that he was not putting on an act. Instead, he really didn't take the negotiation to heart. This time, not to mention the envoys of the Gilded Kingdom, even the representatives of these forces were rather anxious. They were hoping that there would be a force that could contend with Tower of Dusk, but they did not really want to get into a war in the breezy plains. All the forces would definitely be involved in such a conflict. By then, they would all end up becoming cannon fodder, and that did not align with their interests. Besides, the Gilded Kingdom was afraid of the Ashen Warlock, who was supporting the Tower of Dusk, but the forces of the breezy plains knew that the young president of the Tower of Dusk was the most terrifying one. They did not think that the Gilded Kingdom would care about them if a war were to really break out. Besides, the Tower of Dusk would start taking revenge on them first. They still remembered clearly the consequences that some forces had suffered for offending the Tower of Dusk. It was truly a ruthless reprisal. The forces wanted the Gilded Kingdom to turn against the Tower of Dusk, but they didn't want to be the cannon fodder of either party. Hence, the negotiation would definitely be mandatory. However, the members of the Tower of Dusk were clearly no longer interested in the negotiation, and the other factions were just as anxious as the Gilded Kingdom's representatives. In fact, the Plains forces were clear that what they were doing now was unethical, as they were already harming the interests of the Tower of Dusk. After all, the Tower of Dusk was originally already at the pinnacle of the breezy plains, and dominated over the rest. Now, they were trying to give the Tower of Dusk an opponent to deal with. That was obviously harming the interests of the Tower of Dusk. Due to their guilty conscience, those forces began to get increasingly anxious and worried after seeing the behavior of the representatives of the Tower of Dusk. They did not want to end up offending the Tower of Dusk and gaining nothing. This time, if they could reach a consensus, it would still be alright, but if they could not, their forces would not be able to escape, since they were situated in the breezy plains. On the other hand, when the representatives of the various forces were discussing countermeasures for the matter of the Tower of Dusk in the conference hall, Kantori and the others from the Gilded Kingdom headed to a lounge outside the conference hall, instead of returning to the battleship in the port. As soon as they entered the lounge, Kantori, who had been holding back for a long time, immediately lost his temper and vented his anger for a long time before stopping. He then said, "Elder Jory, I think you'd better invite Elder Rustin and the others to come and just destroy the Tower of Dusk. These guys are simply too arrogant." Elder Rustin Kantori mentioned was the chief elder of the Illuminati, who was a true sanctuary powerhouse, and was not inferior to the Pope of the Illuminati in power. Kantori clearly did not just want to destroy the Tower of Dusk, he wanted to eliminate the Ashen Warlock as well. Hearing Kantori's words, Elder Jory shook his head a little, and waited for Kantori to calm down before slowly saying, "Rustin and the other Sanctuary Realm elders are all busy with monitoring the Endless Ocean, and have no time to come. Besides, if they really stepped on the mainland, the horror that they would face would be more than just the Ashen Warlock. They might also have to face those people from the Brilliant Shrine and the Supreme Council." Ordinary people might be puzzled and wonder why they had to monitor the Endless Ocean, but as senior executives of the Gilded Kingdom, Nasri and Kantori knew the reason. In fact, they visited the breezy plains, this time as envoys, as they were greatly involved in this matter. The problem of resources was actually not the most important. This time, the largest magic tides appeared in Anral. Although the Gilded Kingdom was far away in the sea, it was also greatly affected. At first, just like those on the mainland, many of their mages, who broke through the bottleneck, saw a huge increase in their strength, which was an extremely joyous affair for many of them. However, to their surprise, there were also some unknown changes under the influence of the magic tides, thus causing the Gilded Kingdom's environment to become increasingly harsher. That was the very reason that the people of the Gilded Kingdom thought of sending envoys to the breezy plains to collect a large amount of resources that they needed, and also to make preparations. If things in the Gilded Kingdom were to really reach an unmanageable state, the breezy plains, which was in between the Felon Kingdom and Leaden Kingdom, would undoubtedly be the foothold of the Gilded Kingdom in Anral. In fact, another hidden purpose of buying the mineral resources that belonged to the local factions was to create a suitable excuse for the Gilded Kingdom to enter the breezy plains. Hence, whether the negotiation in the breezy plains went well would likely be related to the future survival of the Gilded Kingdom. In addition to their inherent arrogance, Kantori and the others were domineering because they wanted to hide the awkward situation that the Gilded Kingdom was in. If others were to discover it, they would probably end up in a passive position. Do we really have to apologize to that unruly guy and invite him back for the negotiation? Kantori asked indignantly. As the top elite of his generation, he had never bowed down to anyone and swallowed his pride to apologize, as it was harder for him than dying. "Kantori, if we can secure our footing in the breezy plains, do you think the Tower of Dusk can pose a threat to us?" Jory asked while stroking his beard and looking at Kantori. At his words, Cantori's eyes finally lit up again. Actually, Elder Jor's idea was very simple. He felt that it would not be too late to take revenge then. If the Gilded Kingdom and the Illuminati got a footing in the breezy plains, wouldn't it be easy for them to deal with the Tower of Dusk? While the representatives of the forces from the breezy plains, as well as the members of the Gilded Kingdom, were discussing the countermeasures to take after Lin Li's departure, Lin Li, who was the center of attention, leisurely led Alan and the others on a casual stroll in Kalan City. They even went to the so-called black market, where they bought many inconspicuous articles. It was not for the sake of earning money, but purely for leisure and relaxation. Lin Li only returned to the Manhwa family's residence when the sky was turning dark. However, he saw the representatives of the forces, who had been waiting for an unknown period of time in the courtyard. They were pacing around anxiously, and immediately beamed with joy when they saw Lin Li returning with the others. They quickly approached, and were almost greeting Lin Li deferentially. "Are you all here to send me off? I appreciate your goodwill. Since you guys have so much work to do, don't waste time here anymore," Lin Li said while leading Alan and the others through the crowd. Soon, they arrived in front of a door of a certain place. Lin Li's words caused the people present to feel awkward. Since they arrived in Kalan City for the negotiation, they had already taken the initiative to meet Lin Li several times before. One reason was that they had a guilty conscience, and the other was that they felt that since the Tower of Dusk had the Gilded Kingdom as an opponent, they probably could no longer dominate the breezy plains. Hence, the other factions would naturally not have to obey Lin Li. However, things had now developed beyond their control, and they had no choice but to take initiative to see Lin Li. They hoped that there would be a force to contend with the Tower of Dusk, but they did not hope for there to be a war in the breezy plains again, as that would harm their interests. Besides, they still wanted the Tower of Dusk to stand up for them and help them reap more benefits from the Gilded Kingdom. Initially, they were somewhat reserved and just hoped to persuade Lin Li to return to the negotiation. Some were even confident that they would succeed in persuading him. However, before they could even get to the main topic, they could tell from Lin Li's words that they were going to leave. "President Flick, are you leaving now?" asked Joseph, the representative and former patriarch of the Mithril Alliance, someone Lin Li knew too. Due to the fact that Joseph's behavior in Prince Bahir's mausoleum had brought about significant losses to the Mithril Alliance, Elvis took over all of Joseph's authority. Now, Elvis had stepped into the sanctuary realm, and although he had done so with the power of the magic tides, his status in the Mithril Alliance was unshakable. Joseph had no choice but to follow Elvis and join the negotiation in the Gilded Kingdom as a representative of the Mithril Alliance. Joseph's question was exactly what everyone else thought. Hence, they fell silent at this moment and were all looking at Lin Li nervously, waiting to hear his answer. Lin Li glanced at everyone with a nonchalant smile, and he naturally said, "Of course, since there isn't an outcome, why bother wasting time here? The Gilded Kingdom is very powerful. When I go back, I must make arrangements and get ready to face the music from the King of the Gilded Kingdom, and maybe you guys." Lin Li's last sentence made everyone frightened to the point of getting goosebumps. What a joke! With that sky castle, the Tower of Dusk could be considered extremely sturdy, and even if the forces in the breezy plains united, they would not be able to defeat the Tower of Dusk unless they had someone like Garesco on their side. Besides, the Tower of Dusk had a terrifying sanctuary powerhouse, whose abilities were not inferior to those of the Ashen Warlock. After thinking about the Tower of Dusk's power carefully, those people no longer hoped for the Tower of Dusk to fight with the Gilded Kingdom. If the two forces were to really duke it out, there would be no chance for them to reap any benefits, and they could only end up being the ones losing out. "President Flick, you must be joking. If the Gilded Kingdom dares to lay a finger on the Tower of Dusk, we, the Mithril Alliance, definitely won't condone it. No matter what kind of enemies we face, the Mithril Alliance will stay firm and stand by the Tower of Dusk." Having learned his lesson previously, Joseph did not hesitate to show his loyalty to Lin Li. "Yeah, President Flick, the Gilded Kingdom is nothing. They're just foreign barbarians. I think we'd better just leave together. Anyway, the Gilded Kingdom doesn't seem sincere about the negotiation," said a representative of the Caesar family, who was also someone Lin Li was acquainted with. It was Claw's grandson, Charles, who had once been in a conflict with Lin Li. I think the author made a mental shortcut here. They think Tofa is supporting Toft, so they have scruples about Toft." As Joseph and Charles, who represented the two top forces, spoke up, the other forces began to profess their loyalty to Lin Li. They were all acting as if they couldn't wait to show Lin Li what they felt from the bottom of their hearts. Of course, in short, they just hoped that Lin Li could stay behind for the negotiation to get more benefits from the Gilded Kingdom. However, Lin Li did not express his stand towards everyone. After all, if the people of the Gilded Kingdom refused to give in, nothing they said would matter. Lin Li was not a warmonger, but he was not afraid of fighting a war, either. The Gilded Kingdom's attitude was key. Soon after the representatives of the forces left, the servants of the Gilded Kingdom followed Lin Li all the way there, claiming that the envoys had invited him over to discuss the matters regarding the negotiation. Seeing that the members of the Gilded Kingdom were still putting on airs at this juncture, Lin Li naturally wouldn't give in to them. Instead, he told the servants to tell his envoys to come see him where he was, and not to disturb him unless it was for something important. After receiving the news from servants, Nasri and the others were so infuriated that they began gritting their teeth, but there was nothing they could do to the Tower of Dusk. After all, they were not in the Gilded Kingdom. Feeling helpless, Kantori and Elder Jory had no choice but to bite the bullet and visit Lin Li. However, the commander-in-chief of the navy, Nasri, had long escaped under the pretext of inspecting the battleship. Kantori and Jory did not bring any followers with them, and they soon arrived near Lin Li's residence. However, when faced with that door, they could not take another step forward. Kantori, the son of the chancellor, the disciple of the priest of the Illuminati, and the elite of his generation, had always been the one others sucked up to. Since when had he ever swallowed his pride and bowed down to anyone? Although Elder Jory seemed kind and personable on the surface, he was only putting on a superficial facade. Deep down, he was actually extremely arrogant. After all, he was one of the elders of the Illuminati, and when he was in the Gilded Kingdom, even the king had to show him some respect. Although the two big shots were not comparable to deities and gods who were above all, they were at least of a high status. However, they actually had to swallow their pride and speak politely to the leader of a small force. That was akin to a king having to bow down to a local boss, which was truly a torment. However, they had no choice but to give in to the leader of a local force, which they were originally disdainful towards. Between their dignity and the survival of their nation, they could only choose to give up their dignity and pride. However, despite having made a clear decision, it still wasn't easy for them to actually do it, especially since they were arrogant by nature. More importantly, through the contact that they had with Lin Li in the past few days, they had gained some understanding of his character. After the first negotiation, which turned out to be fruitless, Lin Li attacked their battleship, and he suddenly left the venue during the second one. God knew what treatment the two would encounter during this visit. The two men hesitated by the gate for half a day, attracting peculiar glances from the people who passed by. Finally, they decided to step onto the stairs in front of the gate and inform the guards of their purpose of visit. They thought that since they were envoys of the Gilded Kingdom, Lin Li wouldn't be too rude to them, no matter how arrogant he might be. However, to their surprise, the guard at the entrance left for 2 hours to go inform Lin Li of their arrival. Even a snail would have returned earlier. While waiting anxiously at the entrance, they had to suffer the embarrassment of being shot dirty looks by others, making them wish that they could turn around and head home. Thus, they waited for 2 hours at the entrance, and the guard finally reappeared. However, the guard was alone. Lin Li did not come out with him to welcome them. Hence, they were immediately angered. They were the envoys of the Gilded Kingdom, and even when they visited the Leaden Kingdom and Felon Kingdom, the kings would welcome them with a grand ceremony, and send ministers with high authority to receive them. However, Lin Li, the president of the Tower of Dusk, actually disregarded their status even though he was just a leader of a small local force. The president would like you to come in, the guard said without sounding overly respectful. Besides, he even returned to the spot where he had been standing previously after saying those words to them, not intending to lead them in at all. Sure, Kantori said while gritting his teeth and secretly clenching his fists tightly in his sleeves. His nails dug deep into his palms, and he finally suppressed his urge to turn around and leave. The last bit of rationality that he had was continuously reminding him to consider the greater good. Elder Jory, who was beside him, immediately looked sullen. Given his status as an elder of the Illuminati, he had never received such treatment even when he met the king of the Gilded Kingdom. Yet, he now had to suffer such treatment in the breezy plains. However, he could imagine that Lin Li would definitely say that there was no need for him to treat them with courtesy since they were in opposing positions if he were to complain about it to Lin Li. The two of them looked at each other with anger and helplessness in their eyes. It couldn't be helped, since Lin Li was now more domineering than them. Lin Li was the key deciding factor of the success of their mission, and even if they deemed Lin Li to be of lowly status, they would still have to swallow their pride and compromise. The two of them entered with sullen expressions. Although they were not ushered by anyone, they nonetheless managed to quickly find their way to the reception hall, where Lin Li, the president of the Tower of Dusk who they hated with a burning passion, was seated still. He was chatting with an old mage, and did not seem to care about their arrival at all. Forcing himself to bear with the displeasure, Elder Jory cleared his throat to catch Lin Li's attention before slowly saying, "Master Felix, if you have any opinions about our negotiation this time, you may voice them. You left without a single word. How could we have come to a consensus in the negotiation then? Hearing those hypocritical words from Elder Jory, Lin Li smiled indifferently and glanced at them. He nonchalantly said, Elder Jory, if you're still going to continue being insincere, I don't think there's a need for any further discussion. Although they often claimed that they were negotiating for peace and that they were being very sincere, they would often behave arrogantly during the actual negotiation, since they refused to give any concessions. How could that be considered a negotiation? Now that Lin Li had the Sky Castle, the Gilded Kingdom and the Illuminati would not be able to pose a threat to the Tower of Dusk, no matter how powerful they might be. Hence, there was no need for Lin Li to give in to them at all. Lin Li's words made the faces of Elder Jory and Kantori turn as red as a tomato. Despite feeling humiliated and enraged, they had no choice but to suppress those emotions, because they were tasked with a mission. After taking 2 deep breaths, Kantori spoke again, his voice shaking with anger. Master Flick, what must we do to express our sincerity then? You should be asking yourselves that question instead. You just have to remember that this is the Breezy Plains, and not the Gilded Kingdom. Lin Li began lecturing them austerely, completely disregarding their status. He was actually lectured by a country bumpkin from the Breezy Plains, who was a nobody and was younger than him. At this moment, Kantori was overwhelmed with fury. Having lived for more than 30 years, he had never been humiliated in such a manner. Other than the elders of the Gilded Kingdom, anyone who dared to speak to him with such disrespect would definitely be thrown into the sea. Although Elder Jory was just as infuriated, he had lived for numerous years, and was experienced enough to remain composed despite being angered. Seeing that Kantori was about to lose his temper, he hurriedly pulled him to the side, and stood in front of Lin Li instead. Master Flick, since you want to see how sincere we are, we will show you enough sincerity. As long as you're willing to sit down for a chat with us, we can forego the fact that your people have attacked our battleship. I can also give the battleship to you as a gift. Hearing those words, Lin Li couldn't help but sneer, and think to himself, they're just trying to gain something without risking anything of their own. How magnanimous of you to say that you're not going to pursue the matter of the attack on your battleship, regardless of whether the Gilded Kingdom gives the battleship to us, or not. It already belongs to the Tower of Dusk. Why do I need you to make that decision? Although Lin Li did not know why the Gilded Kingdom suddenly wanted to enter the Breezy Plains, he could tell from the interaction he had had with them recently that entering the Breezy Plains was extremely important to the Gilded Kingdom. He had to admit that although they did not show much sincerity during the negotiation, it was probably because they were persons of high status, and had never negotiated with anyone before. Having realized that, Lin Li obviously wouldn't take them seriously. With a look of derision, he said, you two should go back, express that sincerity of yours to others. Since you're considered envoys, I won't continue holding it against you. Dumbfounded to hear Lin Li's words, Elder Jory and Kantori even forgot about the anger that they ought to have. In their opinion, Lin Li left the previous negotiation because he was unwilling to compensate them for the damages done to their battleship, and did not want to return it, either. Why hasn't he returned to the discussion table? Did he not agree to those conditions? Wasn't it a generous move to let go of all of the requests they had made previously? Kantori and Jory were not to be blamed as muddleheads here. Their status in the Gilded Kingdom had never allowed them to be faced with such a demanding situation. Given that they were situated far away in the Gilded Kingdom, they also had little opportunity to interact with the countries or forces from the mainland. This was not to mention bending their heads to submit to any forces. To them, they were bestowing the greatest mercy by not retaliating against but forgiving someone who had threatened their benefits. Of course, both of them were not fools, either. They could tell that Lin Li was not convinced by the conditions they had raised. Furthermore, Lin Li had mentioned that he would close an eye given that the two of them were only emissaries from the Gilded Kingdom. This meant that there was still enmity between them. It would not be a peaceful discussion if they were to meet again outside this context. How would Kantori and Jory not be taken aback after meeting such a brutally straightforward man? Why couldn't they just agree to their conditions if they already view them with high regard? What do you mean then, President Flick? I wonder what conditions would bring you back to our discussion table. Elder Jory responded after he regained composure. He had stopped playing negotiation tricks or caring about his ego. He just wanted to know Lin Li's goal. Lin Li smiled after seeing that Elder Jory had finally accepted their circumstances. Don't worry, my requests are actually extremely simple. It would not be a burden on you. I presume that the Gilded Kingdom would have a lot of information about the Endless Ocean given that it had been exploring it for so many years. What I want to have is the most detailed nautical charts, and the most complete set of information it has regarding the Endless Ocean, gathered right from the day it was founded. I don't think this meant much to you, does it? He replied calmly. Wealth, magical equipment, and weapons were not what the Tower of Dusk needed right now. The only thing Lin Li was vying for instead was all of the navigation data the Gilded Kingdom had. While it would be myopic to say that the Gilded Kingdom would have gained complete understanding of the endless ocean across the thousands of years since its founding, it was definite that they would have crucial pieces of information from entrenching themselves in the region for such a long time. If not, the powerful alchemical warships owned by the Gilded Kingdom would just be ants in the endless ocean. The request made by Lin Li was so simple that it was beyond the imagination of Kantori and Juri. Yet, it placed them in an extremely difficult situation as well. While printing the information on a stack of papers would not cost much, the information was the foundation on which the Gilded Kingdom was built. It was the results of countless sweat, shed and lives sacrificed by these navigators across the thousands of years. It was not something that could be priced. A more important reason was due to the fact that the endless ocean was a natural fortress to the Gilded Kingdom. It was a reason why no countries in the mainland had actually had the chance to attack the Gilded Kingdom. The Gilded Kingdom had full access to the endless ocean as well. This information was just like the key to the front gate of one's house. It would definitely threaten the security of the Gilded Kingdom. President Flick, according to my knowledge, most of the forces that belong to the Tower of Dusk are on the mainland. I wonder why you are interested in the nautical maps and data. Juri asked the frowning Lin Li very carefully. He was scared that he would provoke Lin Li unnecessarily. In reality, Kantori and Juri were not the only people who were confused. The people from the Tower of Dusk, Alan and Basel, were baffled by Lin Li's request as well. It did not seem like Lin Li had the intention of seeking trouble with the Gilded Kingdom. His sky castle was conveniently located nearby. The Gilded Kingdom would be an extremely accessible place. Lin Li would not need to tide the crazy waves of the endless ocean if he knew how to fly. It did not seem like he had the intention to establish marine trade, either. The resources of the mainland were more than enough for the Tower of Dusk to meet its present development needs. Marine trade would only help them get a few more dollars. However, Lin Li did not intend to give any explanation. You only need to tell me whether you agree to my requests. I am not obliged to explain why I want that information. Furthermore, do not play tricks on that information. I bet you know that your methods wouldn't work on me, said Lin Li casually. Normal men would not have noticed anything amiss if Kantori and Juri were to alter the records on the unpredictable endless ocean. However, as Lin Li was a sanctuary powerhouse who had an in-depth understanding of the laws in the world, he would be able to detect any strand of information that did not align with the laws. He was not afraid that the Gilded Kingdom would be dishonest in their deal. Although Juri had not entered the sanctuary realm, he knew the abilities of sanctuary powerhouses. One should not belittle a sanctuary powerhouse who had zero understanding about the endless ocean. If he were to gain access to the information, he would be able to spot errors at one glance. This was also the reason that made Juri debate whether he should agree to the request. If it were other people who requested those materials, he might have already handled it to them. President Flick, the item you are requesting is a product of countless lives and blood sacrificed by the Gilded Kingdom over thousands of years. It is not something money can measure. Unless you promised us that mine at the shore, I don't think my king would approve this deal. Kantori presented his conditions wittingly. He wanted Tower of Dusk to trade their Terra mine for this information. So you are saying that you can't measure it with money? You're not wrong, but I don't think that's your one and only copy of the information. Oh well, if you are not keen, I will not force you. Since the Tower of Dusk does not have plans to develop on the waters, both of you may take your leave, concluded Lin Li, dismissing them. He did not plan to give room for negotiation. Hold on, President Flick, hold on. Let us discuss, cried Elder Juri. After knowing that his status was insignificant before the young president of the tower, he finally decided to bend his back. Elder Juri, gasped Kantori. Kantori grew anxious after hearing Elder Jor's words. He feared that they would be giving the information on the endless ocean without receiving any benefits in return. Although Kantori was very arrogant, he was not a prodigal who felt no pain giving away such a valuable national asset. But a more important point was that he had once vouched to help his nation to tide all of its problems no matter how pricey it would be. Now that it would be incurring such a high price, he felt that it would injure his credibility as an envoy. All right, let me give you some time to think about this, then, said Lin Li as he sat motionlessly on his spot. It seemed like he expected the two of them to make the decision right here instead of giving them days and nights to decide on the partnership. Elder Juri and Kantori were initially intending to return for a more detailed discussion. Lin Li's stance had also made them too uncomfortable to engage in a private conversation. Elder Juri finally started the ball rolling by speaking to Kantori directly. Kantori, I know your concerns, but I'm sure you are aware of the situation the kingdom is in right now. If that information can help us succeed in the mission, I'm sure both His Majesty and His Lordship would recognize your contributions. He spoke with his voice lowered. But, said Kantori, he wanted to rebut Elder Jory, but he understood what the elder was also trying to bring across with those words. He was extremely clear about the situation the Gilded Kingdom was in. Although he was uncertain about what would happen to the endless ocean, he feared that the breezy plains would be coming at them soon. If that day were to come, no one would know how much the nautical materials owned by Gilded Kingdom would be worth anymore. Furthermore, even if the Gilded Kingdom did not need to retreat, the drastic transformation of many marine regions had been very worrisome recently. As this might mean a discount on the value of their nautical information, it might be better off for them to hand them to the young president, in case he were to add any more conditions to the deal after knowing the changes within the endless ocean. This thought settled Kantori's heart so much that he even felt a sense of joy. Elder Jory, I understand. Let's do what you suggest then, said Kantori in a suddenly different tone. Although Kantori and Elder Jory had made the decision, both of them felt that it was only acceptable if they could gain benefits from the deal as well. It wouldn't make sense for them to agree to the demands of the Tower of Dusk blindly. Hence, when they turned to continue the discussion, they tried their best to request as many benefits as they could. However, when they tried to put up the same stance as what they did to the other forces of the breezy plains, they were overpowered by Lin Li's stance. Lin Li was not agreeable to any additional conditions. Resources had to be bought at the same price, as though they were unrelated to one another, and it would be a distant dream to join stocks with the Tower of Dusk. The negotiation went on for a while, and it was visible that Lin Li had started to show signs of impatience. Not to waste all the efforts they had put in to get to the current stage of relationship, Elder Jory and Kantori finally conceded that they should stop insisting further. It wasn't until they finally walked out of the main door that they realized that no one had invited them to take a seat when they entered the meeting room. They stood through their discussion without experiencing any niceties. The thought of the insulting interaction they had with the young president earlier on made their blood boil the very moment they stepped out of the room. Yet, they could only bottle it up, for they had only walked a short distance from the door. Of course, no matter how furious or how strongly they hoped to tear the Tower of Dusk into pieces, both men knew their priorities. After returning, they sent their men to inform the representatives of each of the forces in the breezy plains that they were going to hold another meeting on the following day. This news surprised the representatives. Could it be due to a successful deal established between the Gilded Kingdom and Tower of Dusk? Although it was not bad news to them, for they had no intention to incite a war in the breezy plains, they could not help but feel curious which of the two headstrong organizations gained more advantage in their deal. However, the discussion had to continue despite a lopsided deal. While the Tower of Dusk dared to put up a stance against the Gilded Kingdom, the latter was not a power that these representatives dared to disregard. On the day of the third meeting, the Tower of Dusk made a late appearance again, but this time, apart from the unpleasant expressions of the people of Gilded Kingdom, no one made any response to it. This meeting was actually a show for Lin Li to watch. There was nothing else to negotiate between the Gilded Kingdom and Tower of Dusk. Although the agreement had yet to materialize on paper, he knew that Gilded Kingdom would not dare to disregard it. The biggest show here was the exchange between the representatives from the Gilded Kingdom and the other forces of the breezy plains. But Kantori and the rest were not as rigid and headstrong as before this time. They had loosened up on a lot of conditions. Although the forces of the breezy plains had been intimidated by the Gilded Kingdom and Illuminati, they would never let such a thick piece of meat slide from their mouths. Furthermore, having survived in a chaotic place like the breezy plains, the craftiness of these representatives was definitely not something Kantori and Elder Jory could match up with.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.